Mom and Dad said I could move in. Rebecca smirked at me with that infuriating confidence of hers. If you've got a problem with it, go ahead and call the cops. My older sister stood there in my trashed living room, arms crossed like she owned the place. The space that used to be my pristine sanctuary now looked like a tornado had blown through it, leaving destruction in its wake. I'm Morgan Bennett, 31 years old, and I've built my reputation as an interior designer in Miami from absolutely nothing. Back in my teens, I dove headfirst into the creative world I'd always fantasized about, burning the midnight oil for years and years until I finally launched my own design firm. These days, I'm designing homes for South Florida's wealthiest clients, and my business keeps growing steadily. My success story is written all over my second home that overlooks South Beach, a minimalist white canvas decorated with art and furniture I've collected from every corner of the globe. That place fills me with inspiration every single time I walk through the door. But I wasn't about to stop there and rest on my accomplishments. My next big move was expanding to the West Coast, specifically Beverly Hills. Opening a design studio and gallery out there would require massive capital, the kind of investment that makes you think twice and plan carefully. So I came up with a practical solution that made good business sense. I'd rent out my Miami penthouse and funnel that rental income straight into funding the expansion. Once I'd made up my mind, I moved fast and decisively. First thing I did was reach out to Jason Martinez, the property manager I'd worked with before and trusted completely, asking him to find me the perfect tenant who would respect the space. Then I had my attorney draft an ironclad lease agreement that would cover every possible scenario and protect my interests as the property owner. My philosophy has always been simple and straightforward. In business, everything hinges on documentation and contracts. You can't ever be too careful when protecting your assets and investments. To make sure the property was in pristine condition, I renovated the entire interior and had a top-of-the-line security system installed. A few weeks later, the penthouse was gleaming like a five-star hotel suite. I felt confident everything was ready. All I needed now was to find the right renter. At that moment, I didn't have a single worry in the world. I had no clue that the person who would completely destroy my sanctuary was actually a lot closer than I ever imagined. My parents lived quietly in the Florida suburbs, a typical middle-class couple who never really understood the scope of what I'd built. One weekend, I drove out to see them and mentioned my plan to rent out the Miami penthouse to finance my West Coast expansion. "Mom and Dad, I'm opening a new studio on the West Coast," I explained. "So I'm going to rent out my Miami place for a while." My father, Robert, squinted at me with that proud look he gets. "That's incredible, Morgan. I'm really proud of you, sweetheart." But my mother, Linda, frowned immediately. "Rent it to strangers? That gorgeous home? Isn't that risky?" "Don't worry, Mom. I've got a management company handling it, plus my lawyers overseeing everything. It'll all be done properly." That's when it happened. Like she'd been waiting just outside for her cue, my sister Rebecca walked in with her 3 kids, Emma, Tyler, and Sophie. She must have been eavesdropping. "Morgan's renting out her place," she said with fake surprise in her voice. The kids instantly turned the living room into a disaster zone, bouncing on the couch and demanding snacks. "Yeah, it's for business," I said curtly. Rebecca's face lit up like someone had just handed her a winning lottery ticket. "Oh, perfect. Then you can rent it to us." Her words were so casual, so presumptuous, that for a second I couldn't even process what she'd just said. "To you?" "That's right. Our apartment's way too cramped now that the kids are getting bigger. And your penthouse is in an amazing school district, isn't it? It'd be perfect for the kids' education." Her eyes were practically sparkling with excitement. In her mind, the whole thing was already decided. She and her family would live rent-free in her little sister's luxury penthouse while her kids attended top-tier schools. I calmly but firmly brought her back down to earth. "Rebecca, this is business. The rental income is part of my investment strategy." Rebecca's eyes went wide. "Rent? You're seriously going to charge us rent?" Her voice echoed through the room. My mother jumped to Rebecca's defense. "Morgan, how can you say that? Rebecca's your only sister raising 3 children. You could help her out. Help her out? This is my property, my business. It's not charity. My voice came out cold. My father tried to mediate. Let's all calm down. But Rebecca exploded. She glared at me like a crusader for justice. Morgan, you don't get it. You have no idea how hard it is for a normal family to raise 3 kids. All you care about is making money. You've never stressed about grocery bills or tuition like we do. Her words were unfair. She had no clue how hard I'd worked, how many risks I'd taken. In her eyes, I was just the lucky little sister who made easy money. You wouldn't understand. Rebecca's voice turned shrill and hysterical. You live alone in your fancy apartment doing what you love, making tons of money. What's wrong with helping family? Now you want to charge your own sister rent? You're greedy, Morgan. Heartless. Greedy? I repeated slowly. I could feel blood rushing to my head. I wasn't angry anymore, just stunned by the absurdity. My mother twisted the knife deeper. She's right. You can help your family. That's what family means. God wants those who have to share. God? I almost laughed. What they were doing wasn't generosity. It was entitled dependency dressed as virtue. I stood quietly. That's enough! This conversation is over. My decision stands. I turned to leave, but Rebecca screamed at my back. Don't you dare walk away, you ungrateful brat! That family meeting wasn't a discussion. It was just an exhausting, pointless assault on my patience. A few days later, Jason from the property management company called me. Morgan, great news. We've had several inquiries, but there's one couple in particular I think would be absolutely perfect. Both doctors, solid backgrounds, excellent references, and they absolutely love your design aesthetic. Would you be willing to meet them and show the place personally? It was exactly what I'd been hoping for. A pair of doctors would make ideal tenants, responsible, respectful, and financially secure. Absolutely, Jason. Set up the appointment, I said without hesitating. The showing was scheduled for Friday afternoon. At 2 that Friday, I met Jason and the Mitchells in the lobby of my penthouse building. Dr. Ryan Mitchell was this calm, refined gentleman, and his wife, Sarah, radiated intelligence and grace. The moment we shook hands, I knew they were the perfect fit. This way, please, I said confidently, pressing the button for the private elevator. As we rode up, Jason explained the building's advanced security features, filling the space with polite small talk. This second home means everything to me. I designed it right after launching my firm. It represents where everything began. Standing in front of the living room door, I placed my finger on the smart lock scanner. I'm sure you'll absolutely love it. A soft click sounded as the lock disengaged. With practiced grace, I pushed the door open. Please come in. But my words died in my throat. What stretched out before me wasn't the serene, immaculate space I'd so carefully created. The Italian glass coffee table that should have been centered in the room had been shoved to the side, buried under a half-empty cereal box and a milk carton. The pure, white leather sofa was covered with some garish cartoon blanket, and the floor was littered with colorful plastic toys like landmines scattered everywhere. And right in the middle of it all sat Rebecca, wearing sweatpants and clutching a bag of potato chips, watching some loud television show. For a moment, time seemed to stop. My brain couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. Jason's face went completely pale. The Mitchells stood frozen behind me, their expressions shifting from confusion to discomfort. Rebecca glanced up from her chips, looking utterly unbothered. "Oh, hey, Morgan. Didn't expect you today." Her casual tone, like she was greeting me in a coffee shop, made my blood run cold. "What are you doing here?" My voice came out strangely calm, almost detached. "I told you. Mom and Dad gave me permission. If you don't like it, call the police." She said it with this smug grin, like she'd just played the winning card in a game. Behind me, I heard Dr. Mitchell clear his throat awkwardly. "Perhaps we should reschedule," he said quietly to Jason. "I'm terribly sorry," I managed to say, my voice shaking despite my best efforts. "This is completely unauthorized. Please, give me a moment." The Mitchells nodded politely and retreated toward the elevator with Jason, who looked absolutely mortified. The moment they were out of earshot, I turned back to Rebecca. "Get out, now." "Or what?" She laughed, popping another chip into her mouth. "You're going to throw your own sister out on the street? With 3 kids? Mom and Dad would never forgive you." That's when something inside me snapped, not into rage, but into perfect, crystalline clarity. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "911, what's your emergency?" "There's an unauthorized person in my property. I need police assistance for a trespassing situation." Rebecca's face finally changed, the confidence draining away. "You're not serious." I gave the dispatcher my address, name, and a calm description. When I hung up, Rebecca stood, face flushed. "You called the cops? On your sister? You're insane. I'm protecting my property. The police will be here shortly." Panic flickered across her face. "Mom and Dad gave me permission." "They don't own this property." "I do." Within 15 minutes, 2 officers arrived. I showed them my documents and explained Rebecca had no lease, no permission, and entered illegally. Officer David Torres listened, then turned to Rebecca. "Ma'am, do you have documentation showing legal right to be here?" Rebecca stammered about family, about our parents' permission, but the officer cut her off. "Without owner consent, this is trespassing. Gather your belongings and leave immediately, or we'll arrest you." "Where are the kids?" I asked. "They're in the bedroom," Rebecca said, her face crumpled. I found Emma, Tyler, and Sophie huddled on the bed, scared and confused. My heart ached, but this wasn't their fault. I called my parents. Mom answered immediately. "Morgan, what's happening?" "Rebecca texted you called police." "That's correct. She broke into my property. Officers are here. Come get the kids now. How could you do this to your sister?" Mom's voice was shrill. "I did what Rebecca told me to. She said call the police if I didn't like it. So I did. This wouldn't have happened if you hadn't given her my key without permission." "Are you blaming me?" "You're abandoning your sister." "She's 38, Mom. A grown woman and mother. She's responsible for her actions. You meant well, but your kindness turned your daughter into a criminal." I heard Mom gasp. Rebecca stared at me, her face drained of all color, eyes wide with despair as the officer stood beside her. "You will never again step into my life or touch my property without my explicit permission. From now on, you and Dad will take full responsibility for Rebecca and her children. Our little family game is finished." I ended the call. Turning to Officer Torres, I said calmly, "My parents will be here shortly to pick up the children. Here's their contact information." I handed him the details. The officers nodded and informed Rebecca she was being taken into custody for trespassing. When they escorted her out, only the children's confused, frightened cries echoed through the room. I knelt down and spoke to them as gently as I could. "It's going to be okay now. You don't need to be scared. Grandma's coming to get you very soon." Emma was still sobbing, and all I could do was gently stroke her trembling back in silence. They weren't to blame. Their only mistake was being born to a foolish mother. About 30 minutes later, my parents arrived, pale and breathless. My mother rushed to the children, gathering them in her arms as they cried. My father stood frozen, his gaze moving between the destroyed living room and my face. Anger, disappointment, and maybe a flicker of fear clouded his expression. "Morgan, what have you done?" His voice was thin, forced out through clenched teeth. "What have I done? I protected what belongs to me according to the law," I replied evenly. "What's wrong with calling the police on trespassers? They're your family. I've heard that word enough for one lifetime." I cut him off. "Have you ever once stopped to think about how much I've had to sacrifice for your so-called family? Rebecca became who she is because you both enabled her, spoiled her, shielded her from consequences, and taught her that everyone else would clean up her messes. This ends right now. You'll take the children. You can also pay for her lawyer." My mother glared at me over the children's heads, her eyes burning with hatred. "You're no daughter of ours." Those words should have pierced my heart like a blade. But strangely, there was no pain. Instead, I felt something close to relief, like a heavy chain I'd been dragging for years had finally broken. You're probably right, I said quietly. Then I turned my back on them. My parents hurried out, shepherding the children toward the door. It closed behind them with a final click. Silence settled over the room, real and absolute. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the chaos they'd left behind. Toys scattered everywhere, chocolate stains on the sofa, crinkled candy wrappers tossed around carelessly. It looked like the remains of a sickness finally purged, the rot that had been festering inside something called family. That very day, I called a locksmith and had every single lock in the house changed. I would make absolutely certain they could never set foot in this sanctuary again. Then I grabbed a stack of garbage bags and started throwing everything away. Every toy, every piece of clothing, every trace of them. The next morning, I called Jason, the property manager. He sounded absolutely mortified over the phone. Morgan, I cannot apologize enough for what happened yesterday. I already reached out to the Mitchells personally to try and smooth things over, but I'm afraid. I know, Jason. Regaining their trust will be difficult. I cut him off. Mid-sentence. But my decision stands. You've done your best. If you think it's better for me to find a new management company, I'll understand. Absolutely not, he said, his tone firm. Morgan, your composure yesterday was remarkable. I'm not losing a client like you over something like this. Please let me handle it. I'll find you the perfect tenants this time, and I'll take complete responsibility. His professional, steady words brought me a small sense of relief. There were still people in this world who valued reason, who respected contracts and boundaries, and that small fact soothed the raw edges of a heart scraped open by family. Within a week, I flew to Beverly Hills and finalized the lease on my new studio location. I had enough capital to move forward without Miami's rental income. It proved I could stand alone. A few weeks later, Jason called with excitement. Morgan, I found the perfect tenants. The new renters were French tech executives who'd just relocated. They loved the house immediately and offered 1.2 times market rate, 2 years in advance. Everything I'd fought for was finally mine. 6 months into my Beverly Hills life, Aunt Patricia called from Italy. She was the only family member I truly respected, having built her own independent life in Europe decades ago. Morgan, darling, I saw your new studio in a magazine. It looks stunning. After some small talk, her tone softened. I heard about Miami. You must have been through a lot. It's over now, Aunt Trish, I said steadily. I know, but listen for a moment. It's about Rebecca. Rebecca had avoided formal charges since it was her first offense and she had young children. Still, her life never recovered. The story spread through the family. Relatives who'd always helped her quietly pulled away once they learned the police were involved, and it was her selfishness that caused it. No one's willing to help them anymore, Aunt Patricia said gently. Her landlord heard about the incident. After neighbor complaints, her lease renewal was refused. Even your parents, worried about appearances, no longer coddle Rebecca. They all ended up in a small apartment on Miami's outskirts. I listened silently, feeling only calm. Morgan, you did the right thing. You're not obligated to sacrifice your life for something called family. You have every right to protect your happiness and build a life that's truly yours. Don't forget that. Those were the words I'd waited my whole life to hear. I no longer see the Miami house as a sanctuary. It's just property now, part of my portfolio. My real sanctuary lives within me, where no one can invade. Blood doesn't make family. True family respects your life and stands beside you, not on top of you.
Money was always the language my family spoke most fluently. The Caldwell family fortune started with my grandfather in the 1960s. Commercial real estate investments that turned $50,000 into $8 million over 2 decades. Dad inherited that foundation and built it into something bigger through aggressive stock market plays in the 80s and 90s. By the time I was born, the family was worth approximately $180 million. Growing up, every dinner conversation revolved around investments. Portfolio allocations, market trends, upcoming IPOs, dividend yields. My older brother Marcus, 7 years my senior, absorbed it all like he was born for it. By 16 he was managing a $500,000 trust fund Dad set up for him as a learning experience. My sister Vanessa, 4 years older than me, got her own $500,000 trust at 16 too. She turned it into $1.2 million by 23 through careful blue-chip stock selections and municipal bonds. When I turned 16, I asked about my trust fund. Dad had looked at me over his reading glasses. Let's see how you do with your savings account first, Lily. Investing isn't for everyone. But Marcus and Vanessa got theirs at 16. Marcus and Vanessa showed aptitude. You're more creative. Basic. Not everyone has a mind for numbers. I'd gotten a savings account with $10,000 instead. The message was clear. I wasn't smart enough for real money. I heard it constantly growing up. Lily's the creative one, Mom would tell her friends. Marcus has the business brain, Vanessa has the analytical mind, and Lily has the artistic soul. Every family needs balance. What she meant, every family needs someone to be less than the others. I wasn't bad at school. I got A's in everything, including mathematics. But when I brought home my report card with a perfect score in AP Calculus, Dad glanced at it and said, "That's nice, honey. Marcus just made $47,000 on a tech stock play. Did you want to hear about his strategy?" By college, I'd stopped trying to engage with family investment discussions. I studied economics at Yale, paid for by a trust fund that was controlled by my parents and distributed in small monthly allowances, so I'd learn budgeting. Marcus got his full trust access at 21. Vanessa got hers at 22. I was 24 when I finally asked about mine. "We've decided to keep yours in trust a bit longer," Dad said. "You haven't shown the maturity level needed for that kind of responsibility. Your spending habits are concerning." My spending habits consisted of rent, groceries, and student loan payments. But I didn't argue. I just nodded and continued living on my $2,800 monthly allowance while Marcus bought a $3.2 million condo in Manhattan with his distributions. After Yale, I took a position at J.P. Morgan as a junior analyst in their investment management division. Entry-level work, nothing glamorous, but I was good with data. Very good. I could see patterns in market behavior that others missed, identify undervalued assets, predict sector rotations before they happened. My family never asked about my work in any meaningful way. Family dinners still revolved entirely around their investments, their strategies, their gains and losses. "How's the bank job?" Dad would ask occasionally. "Good. Still doing basic analyst stuff?" "For now." "Well, everyone has to start somewhere." Marcus started in the mailroom, and look at him now. Marcus had spent 2 weeks in a mailroom as a college internship before Dad gave him a position managing $12 million in family assets. But I didn't point that out. What I didn't tell them, I'd made VP at JP Morgan by 28. My portfolio management team handled $4.7 billion in assets for high-net-worth clients. My personal compensation was $1.8 million annually, plus performance bonuses that added another $3 to $4 million per year. What I definitely didn't tell them, I'd been building my own investment portfolio since I was 22, starting with the small inheritance from my grandmother that bypassed the family trust structure. $75,000 that I turned into $8 million through aggressive but calculated plays in emerging tech, biotech, and strategic options trading. By 32, I had $94 million in personal assets. I lived in a modest apartment in Brooklyn, drove a 7-year-old Toyota, bought clothes from J.Crew. My family assumed I was barely making ends meet on my bank salary, probably around $80,000 a year in their estimation. "Must be tough in New York on your income," Vanessa had said once, her voice dripping with sympathy. "Let us know if you need help with rent." "I'm managing fine." "You don't have to be proud, Lily. We're family. There's no shame in accepting help when you've chosen a less lucrative path." I'd smiled and changed the subject. 3 years ago, something interesting happened. Dad, Marcus, and Vanessa had a crisis. Their investment strategy, aggressive individual stock picking with heavy leverage, worked brilliantly in bull markets but was catastrophically vulnerable to corrections. When the market dropped 18% over 6 weeks in early 2021, their leveraged positions got margin called. They lost $67 million collectively. Nearly 40% of the family wealth evaporated. Dad called an emergency family meeting. I flew home to Greenwich, Connecticut, sitting in the same dining room where I'd been told countless times that I didn't understand investing. "We're restructuring everything," Dad announced, his face gray with stress. "We need to consolidate our assets, create a unified family investment strategy, bring in professional management." "What about your individual portfolios?" I asked. We're merging everything into one family fund, Marcus said. $110 million in combined assets. We need professional management, not a bank but a private wealth advisor who understands high-net-worth families. Have you found someone? We're interviewing candidates. We need someone brilliant, someone with a proven track record, someone who can rebuild what we lost. What are the requirements? Minimum 10 years experience, verified performance history managing $500 million plus in assets, expertise in both growth and preservation strategies, Vanessa listed. Dad's working with a headhunter. I nodded slowly, said nothing. Over the next 3 weeks I watched them interview candidates. They brought 5 prospects to the house, all men between 45 and 60, all with impressive credentials and expensive suits. They chose Bradford Whitmore. 61 years old, 35 years experience, managing partner at Whitmore Wealth Management. Conservative, traditional, exactly what they thought they needed. The problem? Bradford's actual performance history was mediocre at best. His verified returns over 20 years averaged 6.8% annually, barely beating the S&P 500. His expertise was mostly in maintaining existing wealth, not growing it. His client base consisted primarily of old money families who wanted someone trustworthy to do nothing risky with their assets. He was a terrible choice for rebuilding what they'd lost. But I said nothing. They signed with Bradford, transferred their $110 million to his management, and spent 6 months watching him generate 4.2% returns while the market returned 14%. At Thanksgiving that year, Dad was visibly frustrated. Bradford's too conservative. We're not making back what we lost. You need someone more aggressive, Marcus said. But everyone aggressive wants to charge 2% management fees plus 20% performance fees. It's highway robbery. Maybe we should manage it ourselves again, Vanessa suggested. And risk another crash? We can't afford to lose more. I ate my turkey silently. Lily, you work at a bank, Mom said suddenly. Do you know any good investment advisors? Some. Anyone you'd recommend? I considered my answer carefully. I know someone. Very good track record, aggressive but calculated strategy, reasonable fees. But they're selective about clients. How selective? Very. Minimum investment is usually $50 million and they only take clients they believe they can really help. Could you make an introduction? Dad asked. I could ask. No promises. What's their track record? 22% average annual returns over 8 years. Verified by external audit. The table went silent. 22%? Marcus's voice was skeptical. That's impossible to maintain. It's verified. I've seen the documentation. What's the name of the firm? Vanessa asked. LMC Capital Management. None of them recognized it. Why would they? I'd established it 5 years earlier as my personal investment vehicle, named with my initials. Lily Marie Caldwell. Structured through layers of legal entities, nothing obviously connected to me. Can you set up a meeting? Dad pressed. I'll reach out. They're very private. No guarantees. I left Thanksgiving dinner and spent the weekend setting up the infrastructure. My attorney drafted the management agreement. My accountant prepared the verified performance history. All legitimate, all auditable, all showing exactly what I told them. The following week I sent them the contact information. An email address, a phone number that routed through my corporate structure, and a calendar link for scheduling. Dad called me 3 days later. We reached out to LMC Capital. They want to meet next week. Can you join us? Since you made the introduction, it might help. I'll try. I have work commitments, but I'll see what I can do. The meeting was scheduled for their house in Greenwich on a Tuesday afternoon. I arrived 15 minutes early, wearing a Saint Laurent suit I'd never worn around my family before, carrying a Bottega Veneta briefcase, looking every inch the successful executive I'd always been but never showed them. Dad answered the door and stared. Lily. Is everyone here? Yes, but you look different. I came from work. Conference calls all morning. Where should we meet? He led me to his study where Mom, Marcus, and Vanessa waited. They all looked at me strangely. The expensive suit, the confident posture, the aura of professional competence I'd carefully hidden for 3 decades. LMC Capital should be here any minute, Dad said. Thanks for coming, honey. Your introduction might really help us. I sat down, opened my briefcase, removed a document. They're already here. What? I slid the document across the desk. LMC Capital Management. Lily Marie Caldwell, founder and chief investment officer. That's me. The silence was absolute. Marcus picked up the document, his hands shaking. This is a joke. It's not. LMC Capital is my firm. I've been managing investments for 8 years. Currently overseeing $680 million in assets for 17 clients, plus my own portfolio of $94 million. You're worth $94 million? Vanessa's voice was barely a whisper. As of yesterday's close, yes. $94,700,000 approximately. Dad's face had gone pale. How? I'm good at investing. Turns out I have a mind for numbers after all. But you work at JP Morgan, Mom said weakly. I'm a managing director at JP Morgan. I run their emerging markets investment division. I handle that portfolio during business hours and run LMC Capital independently. My compensation from JP Morgan last year was $6.8 million. LMC Capital generated another $18 million in management fees and performance bonuses. The numbers hit them like physical blows. $25 million, Marcus said slowly. You made $25 million last year. Approximately. And you live in that shitty apartment in Brooklyn. It's not shitty. It's efficient. I don't need space I won't use. Why? Dad's voice shook. Why didn't you tell us? You never asked. You spent 32 years telling me I wasn't qualified to invest, that I didn't have a mind for numbers, that I should stick to my savings account. I saw no reason to correct your assumptions. We thought you were struggling, Mom said. I know. You offered to help with my rent. You sent me a $5,000 check for Christmas last year, to help with expenses. You suggested I get a roommate to split costs. You worried about me constantly because you assumed I was barely surviving. You could have told us, Vanessa said. Like I told you about my perfect score in AP Calculus? Like I told Dad I wanted to learn about investing when I was 12? Like I asked about my trust fund at 16, 21, 24, and 28? I told you plenty. You just never listened. Marcus found some anger. This is manipulative. You let us think. I let you think what you wanted to think. You assumed artistic meant stupid. You assumed creative meant incompetent with money. You assumed that because I wasn't loud about my success like you two, I must not have any. So this is revenge? Dad asked. No. This is business. You need investment management. I provide investment management. I'm the best person for the job regardless of our relationship. We can't hire you, Marcus said. It's too weird. I shrugged. Then hire someone else. But Bradford Whitmore is generating 4% returns in a 14% market. At that rate you'll rebuild your losses in approximately 17 years. I can do it in 4. How? Vanessa demanded. I opened my briefcase, removed a presentation deck. 80 slides of detailed analysis, strategy frameworks, sector allocations, risk management protocols. Everything they needed to see that I knew exactly what I was doing. I walked them through it for 90 minutes. My investment philosophy, my track record, my specific strategies for their situation. I showed them client testimonials, verified performance data, external audits. By the end they were silent. Your returns are legitimate? Dad asked finally. Completely verifiable. I can connect you with my clients, my auditors, third-party verification services. Everything is documented and transparent. Why didn't you tell us? Mom repeated. Because I wanted you to value me for who I was, not what I had. I wanted you to respect my intelligence, my capabilities, my contributions. Instead, you spent 3 decades dismissing me as the family's artistic failure. We never said failure, Vanessa protested. You didn't have to. Every time you explained to someone that I was the creative one, the subtext was clear. Every time Marcus and I were compared, the implication was obvious. Every time my career was described as nice, while yours was impressive, I understood exactly what you meant. No one could deny it. So what happens now? Marcus asked. That's up to you. You need investment management. I'm offering my services. Industry standard fees. 1% management fee, 15% performance fee. Those are actually lower than what I charge most clients because of the family connection. You charge us? Mom looked shocked. I charge everyone. This is my profession. I'm very good at it and I don't work for free. What if we say no? Dad asked. Then say no. I have 17 other clients and a waiting list of 47. I don't need your business. You asked for an introduction to a good investment manager. I'm the best one you'll find. But if you'd rather hire someone else because your ego can't handle your youngest daughter being better at this than you, that's your choice. I started packing my briefcase. Wait, Dad said quickly. Just wait. Let us discuss this. I'll give you privacy. I'll be in the living room. I walked out, leaving them to their crisis. Through the closed door I could hear raised voices. Marcus arguing this was humiliating. Vanessa insisting it was too weird. Mom worried about family dynamics. Dad surprisingly defending the numbers. They were undeniable and he knew it. 20 minutes later, Dad emerged. We'd like to move forward. But we have concerns about the family dynamics. Such as, how do we separate business from family? How do we make sure this doesn't ruin our relationship? We establish clear boundaries. During business hours, I'm your investment manager. You treat me with the same professional respect you'd give any advisor. Outside business hours, we're family. The roles don't mix. What if we disagree with your investment decisions? You signed away decision-making authority when you chose Bradford. Same terms apply here. You set your risk tolerance and goals, I execute the strategy. You get quarterly reports and can ask questions, but day-to-day decisions are mine. That's a lot of control, Marcus said from the doorway. That's how investment management works. If you want to make your own decisions, do it yourself. If you want professional management, you cede control to the professional. Dad nodded slowly. What's your honest assessment? Can you rebuild what we lost? Yes. 4 years, maybe 5, you'll be back to $180 million. 6 years, you'll be at $250 million. That's conservative projection assuming 18% average annual returns, which is below my historical performance. And if there's another market crash? My downside protection is significantly better than your previous strategy. I use sophisticated hedging, don't overleverage, maintain diversification. When the market dropped 18% in 2021, my portfolios dropped 6%. When it recovered, we captured 94% of the upside. Risk management is half of what I do. What's the other half? Finding opportunities everyone else misses. That's where the real alpha gets generated. They exchanged glances. Let's do it, Dad said finally. But Lily, this has to be professional. We need to trust you're making decisions based on what's best for the portfolio, not revenge for 30 years of dismissal? He winced. Something like that. I'm a professional. I don't let personal feelings affect investment decisions. Every choice I make will be based on data, strategy, and performance optimization. Your clients, nothing more or less. We signed the management agreement the following week. $110 million transferred to LMC Capital Management, with me as the sole decision-maker on their entire family wealth. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The daughter who wasn't trusted with a normal trust fund at 16 now controlled every dollar her family had. I restructured their portfolio immediately. Liquidated their individual stock positions. Too concentrated, too risky. Moved them into a diversified strategy. 40% growth equities, 25% value equities, 15% international, 10% alternative assets, 10% fixed income. Not sexy, not exciting, but optimized for consistent returns with downside protection. The first quarter they made 7.3%. The market made 6.1%. Second quarter, 11.2% versus market's 8.8%. Third quarter, minus 2.1% versus market's minus 4.7%. Fourth quarter, 9.8% versus market's 7.2%. First year total, 28.4% return. Their $110 million became $141 million. Year 2 was even better. 31.7% return. $141 million became $186 million. They'd not only recovered their losses but exceeded their previous peak. And they couldn't deny it was because of me. Family dinners changed dramatically. Investment discussions still dominated, but now they asked my opinion. Not as a courtesy but genuinely seeking my expertise. Lily, what do you think about emerging markets right now? Dad would ask. I'd give my analysis. Sometimes they'd ask follow-up questions. Sometimes they'd just listen. Marcus struggled the most with the new dynamic. His ego couldn't quite process that his little sister was managing the family fortune. He'd make occasional comments about getting lucky or riding a bull market. After one particularly snide remark, I'd had enough. Marcus, your portfolio when you managed it yourself returned 9.2% annually over 8 years. Mine returns 22% annually. That's not luck. That's skill. If you can't acknowledge that, maybe you should hire a therapist to work through your insecurity. Dad had actually laughed. Mom looked scandalized. Vanessa hid a smile. Marcus went red but said nothing. 2 years into managing their money, Dad asked me to take on a bigger role. We want you to manage the full family office, he said. Not just investments but estate planning, trust structures, tax optimization, everything. We'll pay you appropriately. Full family office managing director compensation. That's typically $2 to $5 million annually for a family your size. We're prepared to pay $3.5 million, plus your normal performance fees on the investment management side. I considered it. That's generous. But I have one condition. What? You acknowledge publicly, at family gatherings, in conversations, in every meaningful way, that I'm not the family's artistic failure. I'm the family's most successful member financially, and you were wrong about me for 3 decades. Silence. You want us to admit we were wrong? Vanessa asked. I want you to acknowledge reality. I'm not asking for an apology, though that would be nice. I'm asking for recognition that your assumptions about me were completely incorrect and that your treatment of me was based on biases, not facts. That's fair, Dad said quietly. We were wrong. Completely embarrassingly wrong. You're not just successful, you're extraordinarily successful. You've built something remarkable and we missed it entirely because we couldn't see past our own prejudices. Thank you. Will you take the role? Yes. Send me the contract. I became managing director of Caldwell Family Office at 34 years old. My siblings, both older than me, now reported to me on financial matters. The daughter who'd been given a savings account while they got trust funds was now managing every aspect of their wealth. The irony was delicious. But I didn't gloat. I didn't rub it in. I just did my job exceptionally well. By year 4, I'd grown the family wealth to $270 million. More than they'd ever had even before the 2021 crash. Dad was now 71, thinking about legacy and succession. He called me into his study one Sunday. I want to restructure the family trusts, he said. Give you control of everything, not just management but ownership. You've earned it. That's not necessary. It's appropriate. Marcus and Vanessa are comfortable, successful in their own right. But you're the one with the vision, the skill, the discipline to preserve and grow this for future generations. I was wrong to doubt you. I want to correct that now. What about Marcus and Vanessa? They'll maintain their current distributions. But ultimate control should rest with you. You've proven you're the only one who should have it. I thought about 16-year-old me asking about a trust fund and being told I wasn't mature enough. I thought about every dismissive comment, every condescending lecture about leaving investing to the experts. I'll think about it, I said. That Sunday dinner, the conversation naturally turned to investments. It always did. Marcus was discussing a stock tip he'd heard. Tech startup, huge potential. I'm thinking of putting $500,000 in personally. What's their revenue model? I asked. Still developing it. But the technology is revolutionary. Sounds risky. You can't make real money without risk, he said with some of his old condescension. That's basic investing. No, that's gambling. Investing is calculated risk with comprehensive analysis. Not everyone can be as cautious as you, Lily. I set down my wine glass. My cautious approach generated 31.7% returns last year. What did your stock picks generate? That's not fair. You're a professional. And you're the one who told me to stick to my savings account because I didn't understand investing. So maybe take your own advice and leave the real decisions to professionals. The table went silent. Dad cleared his throat. Actually, Marcus, I'd like you to run any major investment ideas past Lily before executing. She can help you avoid costly mistakes. Marcus's face reddened, but he nodded. Mom changed the subject quickly, but the power dynamic was clear. I wasn't the family's creative one anymore. I was the family's financial authority. Every decision ran through me. Every strategy required my input. The daughter who'd been told to leave investing to the experts now was the expert everyone deferred to. A month after Dad's succession conversation, I received a text from my portfolio manager at J.P. Morgan. Ready to liquidate their $270 million position? I was at Sunday dinner when it came through. Dad was talking about a charitable foundation he wanted to establish. Mom was suggesting vacation properties. Vanessa was planning her daughter's very expensive wedding. All of it funded by wealth I'd built from $110 million to $270 million in 4 years. All of it controlled by me, the daughter who supposedly didn't have a mind for numbers. I looked around the table at my family, comfortable, secure, planning futures they could afford because I'd made it possible. I texted back, no. Maintain position. They finally learned the lesson. The lesson wasn't about money. It was about assumptions, about dismissal, about the cost of underestimating someone for their entire life. They'd spent 32 years telling me I wasn't qualified to invest. Now their entire financial existence depended on my investment decisions. They told me to stick to my savings account. Now I controlled their $270 million portfolio. They'd said to leave investing to them. Now they left everything to me. That's not revenge. That's just reality finally aligning with truth. I could liquidate their position tomorrow. Walk away and let them scramble to rebuild. Watch them realize exactly how dependent they'd become on the daughter they'd dismissed. But I won't. Because I'm a professional. Because I'm good at my job. Because despite everything they're still my family. And because the best revenge isn't destruction. It's succeeding so completely that everyone has to acknowledge they were wrong. It's controlling everything they value while maintaining perfect professional composure. It's being the person they needed all along, even though they spent decades insisting I was the person they didn't. Dad raised his wine glass. To Lily, who's made all of this possible. We're grateful every day for your brilliance. Everyone drank. I smiled, accepted the recognition, and thought about the girl with the $10,000 savings account who'd been told she didn't understand investing. She'd understood just fine. She'd understood well enough to turn that dismissal into motivation. She'd understood well enough to build an empire in silence. She'd understood well enough to end up controlling every dollar they had. Stick to your savings account, Dad had said. I'd stuck to something better. My instincts, my intelligence, my relentless drive to prove everyone wrong. Now they all know it. And they'll never forget it. Every dollar they spend, every investment they benefit from, every comfortable retirement they enjoy. All of it exists because the daughter who wasn't qualified turned out to be the most qualified person in the family. That's not irony. That's justice. And I earned every single dollar of it.